This is Linda Smith with the Utah Parent Center, and I'm a parent consultant here, so you can call us at any time and we can talk to you about the different issues that Deanne talks about. To work here, you have to be a parent of a child with disabilities. I have 4 sons, anywhere from learning disabilities to significant disabilities, attention deficit. For any of you on this webinar, of course, executive functioning seems to hit all of our kids. They don't remember to bring their homework. They don't remember to write things on a calendar. They can't come home and tell you what you're supposed to do at school. And it's really hard as a parent. So whether your child has learning disabilities, autism, attention deficit disorder, or any other type of disability where they have problems organizing, this is the webinar for you. I do want to say the Utah Parent Center, I heard it mentioned several times as I was passing by this morning. The Utah Parent Center now has a Section 504 DVD that we've done, and you can also get on our website, and you can also click it and watch it on our website. So for those of you that are confused between whether your child's on special education and has an IEP, or Section 504 and you're not quite sure how the system goes, you can watch this DVD. Also, you're feel free to give us a call because we are 504 specialists also, and will help navigate that system as well as the special education system. I want to welcome Deanne Shields today, who is wonderful. She has her master's in educational psychology. She has worked for a private school that deals with individuals with learning disabilities and high-functioning autism and Asperger's, and did that for several years. Now Deanne is a private tutor on reading, especially in dyslexia, but she knows so many different areas, including the autism area. And she lives in Utah County, and Deanne also is the former president for the State Learning Disabilities Association of Utah. So if you're also interested in that and finding out more about learning disabilities, you can always go to their website, which is LDAU for Learning Disabilities Association of Utah.org. And there's information on there and contact information if you have a child with learning disabilities also. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deanne. I'm excited about her doing the seminar. And I had to laugh at her first quote on there because I thought, you know what? My husband always said that my sons could never get anything home. But then when I complained about it, he just looked at me and went, well, it's kind of like you have a hole in your purse, a hole in your backpack. Also, so when you're complaining, you're kind of complaining about the same things I deal with. So yes, you can have problems with executive functioning skills as an adult as well as a youth. So I'm excited to see it both for myself and for the kiddos.
Thanks. I have not just been a school teacher, but I have kids also that have executive functioning problems. And I chose this title because my kids don't bring their stuff home, they say, but they do, because when I go through their backpack, it's just wadded up papers everywhere. Everything they own is in the backpack, sometimes but their schoolwork. Everywhere you go in the house, you see where they've been, because there's little piles of things that are unfinished and started and thought about. And so it seems like wherever they go, they leave evidence of their unorganization, I guess. So that's how I came upon this title. The first thing I thought we could do is talk about what executive functioning is. And so I guess the other thing I'd like to say is, because I'm living this life also, I can tell you that a lot of these things may or may not work, or you might take something and change it just a little bit. You're going to have to try lots of different things. And so hopefully some of these suggestions will help you help your children get organized. Your executive functioning skills are your brain's CEO. It's the part that gets everything organized and helps you get things done. helps you prioritize and plan and organize your life, to stay focused on the task that you're working on, to make a smooth transition from one thing to the next, to generalize something that you do to something similar. And a lot of these kids, you'll teach them something, and then the situation will change just a little bit, and it's like they've never seen it before, and you have to start all over again and teach them in the next situation. It also helps us measure cause and effect. Especially with ADHD kids, sometimes they're really impulsive, and so they're not really thinking about, if I do this, what's going to happen next. They just do it, and then they think about it sometimes afterwards, but then it's too late. It also helps us with working memory, involves working memory. Working memory is not like short-term memory, like what we learned a few minutes ago, but it's how we juggle tasks at the same time. And children that have working memory problems, we see it a lot of times in things like math, doing story problems, because I have to read the problem, I have to take that problem and turn it into a math equation, then I have to remember my math facts, and then I have to write it down and figure it out, and I'm doing all those things at the same time. So working memory is, I compare it to juggling balls. Okay, I'm really good at juggling 1 or 2 balls. Does anyone in here, can you juggle 3? Because there are those people that on TV that used to be able to juggle like 6 or 7 flaming swords back and forth. And so some of our children are 1 and 2 ball jugglers. They can only do a task that has one simple component at a time. And when we give them something that requires lots of things happening at the same time, that's when they start falling apart. So that's also part of executive functioning. The other thing is that we're making a higher demand on children at an earlier age to develop these skills. When I was in kindergarten, we made Jell-O, we had naps, we did finger painting, we played games, and it was a lot of fun. And we did learn how to count, and we learned our ABCs, but we really didn't start reading until we were in 1st grade. Now, when we have kindergarten children, they're like reading. They're not making Jell-O anymore and having naps and playing. They're doing a little bit of that, but we're putting a higher demand on them to develop these skills at an earlier age. And sometimes we don't see that the skills are lacking till they get older, like in middle school and junior high, because in elementary school, the teachers do a lot of that organization for the kids. Here's the little boxes where you put your stuff, and will everyone go get this out? And the teachers do a lot of that. They become the kids' kind of functional CEO for them, and then when they get in junior high and middle school, the teachers kind of assume that the kids already know how to do that, and they stop that process. The other thing is to be organized. Children need to be able to learn how to sort and classify, to categorize things. And so if your child has a difficulty with that, they're going to have a difficulty organizing on their own. Just quickly, also, I thought we would kind of go through some of these skills and when they develop. Behavior inhibition is when we think before we act. And we start developing this when we're infants. When we see mom or dad smile at us, and that helps reinforce, so if I do this, then they smile at me. And so we start making choices about how we're going to behave. The nonverbal working memory is when I remember something that happened, so I'm planning ahead. And so I'm taking experiences that I've already learned, and I'm thinking ahead. I'm moving beyond what's happening at this very moment. And that starts developing around 6 months and on. Then we have internalization of speech. We're using language to represent ideas. The best way to explain this is to give you an example. Have you ever walked in a room and you see little kids and they're pretending like they're school teachers or parents, and they're telling their dolls what to do, or they're acting out something? And so that's that internalization of speech. I'm role modeling, and I'm playing, and I'm talking about how I want to behave or how things are supposed to happen. I'm developing strategies to solve problems and instruct myself. So that's kind of starts happening in early childhood. Self-regulation, regulating our emotional states, not self-regulated if I just kind of go off the handle when I get really frustrated or I start crying. Or states of arousal, getting started on a task, having enough energy or motivation to actually begin what I'm supposed to do. And then regulation is the ability to divide more complex behavior sequences into little units. So this is being creative and flexible and fluent in different tasks. Something to think about is that teachers count on students to pick up on visual clues and mimic their behavior. And as parents, we also do the same thing. We assume that kids are watching what we do, and that's how they're going to learn how to do it. And for most of us, that's the way we learn how to do it. We don't sit down and think. We have to actually teach them and talk to them about how to do these things. But if kids aren't visual learners, they're not going to learn from watching us do those things. And children with learning disabilities and Asperger's and ADHD, they're not always connecting in their learning styles the way we think they are, and they will struggle with that. And when they fail to live up to those expectations, then they're accused of being lazy or oppositional. And instead of saying they don't have this skill, we start labeling it like it's a character flaw, like it's something they're purposely doing. I know in my house with one of my daughters, I was telling the story how one day she wanted to cook something in a package and then chose not to cook it. And later on, I was walking down the hall and the package was on the floor in the middle of the hall, and I'm thinking, who does that? I've just decided I'm not going to do it, so I just drop what I'm doing and go do something else. And we noticed over time that she, just would get so distracted and forget completely one task and move on to another. And at first we thought we were treating it more like it was a purposeful thing. And then as we got talking with each other, we realized nobody would do this on purpose. It's too pervasive. It's in every piece of her life. And so when we accepted that fact, then we started interacting with her in a different way that was more positive for her and more positive for us. Where do we begin? Sometimes we try to impose our style of learning and organizing and doing things to our children. And that doesn't always work. They may have a completely different style, and so it's not going to work for them. And sometimes we don't explain why we do the things. We just say, well, just do it, instead of explaining why this is going to help them and what we're trying to accomplish. We want to try to determine their learning style. So visual learners, they like to see things written down. They like lists of things, or like looking at pictures or diagrams and taking notes and things like that. An auditory learner likes to get their information from listening. They like to discuss and teach things. The child that does better if they can talk to you about what they're learning when they're studying and don't really rely on their notes. If the child has a reading disability, then they're probably going to be more auditory learners. And the problem is a lot of times in school and stuff, and even at home, how often do we make lists for our kids? Or do the teachers write down all the information on the board? And so if you're an auditory learner, that's not going to help you very much. Kinesthetic learners like to learn by doing things, by touching, by moving, by acting them out. They're going to be really, really active and really, really busy. And they're the kids who, when the teacher gives the test in 6th grade on how to make a simple circuit, they might not do really well on the test, but if you throw all the wires and the pieces out, they'll put it together in like 30 seconds and get it perfect. So knowing how your child learns and gets information will help you decide how you're going to help them organize. I was listening to an interview that someone did with Rick Lavoie, and he quoted somebody else, and I need to go back and find it. But he said there are only really 2 times in a child who's really unorganized in their family. In our house, it's these 2 times, now and not now. So when the teacher says, you have a science fair project due in 3 months, it's not now. At our house, now is the day it's due, and that's when Mom finds out about it. And that's when we're racing through and we're trying to put together a science fair project the hour before school starts. If we're lucky, it could be 5 minutes before school starts. What we have to do is create a lot of nows in the children's lives. So if there is a big project, we want to break it down into a whole bunch of little tiny, it's now, it's now, it's now, it's now, it's now. Because if not, it's always not now until now, and now is too late. Does that make sense? The other thing that I hear from my children and that I heard from my students, because I taught school for 25 years, and I worked with kids with attention deficit, with learning disabilities, with emotional disturbances, with anxiety, with Asperger's, and it's like, I don't have time to do my homework. All I do is homework, and they really feel that way. Part of it is because they're doing a lot of stuff at the last minute, or they lose something and they have to redo it. So it really does feel like they're doing homework all the time. So one thing is to help the kids look and see how much time do you really have. Again, they do end up doing sometimes twice the amount of work because they're redoing a lot of stuff, so they do feel drained. The other thing you need to look at is how does time feel to the child? And I don't know if this sounds familiar to you or not, but your kids think 5 minutes is an hour, or that an hour is 5 minutes. Like they feel time at a different rate. They don't understand how much time something is going to take. So sometimes it's getting a sense from them of what their movement of time feels like. A child who says, I took a really quick shower and they were in there for 45 minutes. It felt quick to them. The rest of the family, it felt like it took a very, very long time. So, and everyone's pounding on the door, but their sense of time is moving at a different rate. One of the things I read was that one of the reasons kids are having problems feeling how time travels is because they have digital clocks everywhere. And so you don't see that hand moving. You don't see that progression of time that those of us grew up using a regular analog clock felt. And so to them, time is just that moment. They see that minute changing on the clock. They don't really have a sense of what it feels like. The other thing is things bombard kids very quickly now compared to what they used to. So sometimes that also contributes to it. The other thing is when we're more organized, we do seem to be able to do more things and get more things done. And if we want them to help get that concept of time and space. And the first tendency to do is a parent or teacher is this kid can't get everything done, so I'm going to take away activities. So they have more time to do like homework and stuff like that. And so then we end up taking away the activities that they enjoy. So they have more time to do the things they hate to do, but those things are really, really important. And then what we find out is they really can't do those other things. They're still isn't organized doing those things they don't like to do. But now they're really unhappy because they're not doing the fun things that they enjoy also. So what we need to do is teach them to be organized so they can fit all those things in. So some suggestions. Help them create a schedule. One thing that I have done with some of my students, and I did this with my son, and I just suggested a mom do it with another student I'm working with this week. She said, I don't want to be the mean homework mother, but we don't get things done. And I said, well, you don't have to be the mean homework mother, but you do have to be the homework mother. And so what you do is sit down and block out all the time after school until bedtime that they have during the week, and then go in and put in the things that they have to do. Like if they have to go to Boy Scouts or they have a job, they have to go work from this hour. So they see these are things I have to do, and this is when they're scheduled. And then let them see how much of that space is actually unoccupied by things. And then have them sit down with your guidance, schedule when they're going to do homework and different activities. And I would also suggest you schedule in downtime, time to watch TV, time to play, time to talk with their friends. You have to break it up or else they're going to be overwhelmed. The other thing that's really funny when you do this is they're going to schedule everything in a row. I'm going to do my math and my English and my, and you're like, don't you want to break it? No, I'm going to get it done. And then you say, okay, just realize that we can adjust this over time. You can give them suggestions, and they'll usually come back after and say, I need a break in here. It's like, okay. You might be surprised at how much they really want to schedule things in. So using your guidance will help them. But then you help remind them of their schedule. So they made this schedule, right? You did it. You're not forcing it on them. They made it. They chose the times. You're just reminding them, oh, remember, this is the time you're going to do this. So let's sit down and let's do this. And then let's move on. Because the other thing that happens if they don't have an idea of schedule is they're going to spend every night working on the one same long assignment and every other class won't get done. Does that make sense? Have you seen that happen where you just focus on the one thing that is that teacher for some reason has made them really anxious about that thing, and in the process of doing it ineffectively, they've spent a lot more time on it than the teacher wanted them to, but everything else falls by the wayside. So sometimes say, well, you're only going to work on English for this amount of time, and then you have to go on to do some math. If you get done with math early, you can go back and do English if you want, or you can take a break. But helping them organize and create that schedule makes them a part of it. If they're not a part of it, they're going to be fighting with you all the time, especially as they get older. The other thing is, if they're not a part of it, you're not teaching them how to develop those skills themselves. I can tell my kids to do this and this and this and this and this, but one day they're not going to be living with me. I hope one day they're not going to be living with me. And so we want to make sure we're teaching them those skills when they're at home, and we can safely do that and kind of back away a little bit of time as they gain more competency in them. Helping prompt them, how much time do you think it's going to take you to finish this? Let's write down your estimate and then go back and see how much time it really did take. So, and that will help them start judging times. Break really big things into smaller parts, and that's that make a whole bunch of little nows. And that's when you need to talk with the teacher and you say, if we have a big research paper, can we turn it in chunks? Can you grade for each little part? Can you give us the spelling words on Friday instead of on Monday for the week, so we have the weekend to start working on them? And so if there is a big assignment, that's a good time to either get the teacher to break it down and grade it into little pieces, or to do that yourself, break it into little pieces and make deadlines along the way. The one thing that was frustrating for me as a teacher is I would see my students working on assignments, big assignments, and then never turned anything in. And so it would get to the point where if I knew that those students that did that, I would just take their paper off the desk at the end of the day and say, I'm going to grade this, and then I'll give it back to you and you can keep working on it. Because if not, they didn't get a grade because they would lose it or they wouldn't finish it, and then they just wouldn't turn it in because they were frustrated or they were embarrassed. Using a timer or other device to help keep track of time. Most kids have an MP3 player or a phone nowadays, an iPod, something. They have alarms on them. So set the alarm to go off 15 minutes after they start to help bring them back on task, or 5 minutes. Or as a teacher, I would say, I'd like you to do this problem. I'm going to walk around and help some other people. I'm going to come back in 5 minutes, and I want to see, and then we'll start the next one. So every few minutes, I would come back and move them to the next. So I was being kind of like their bell, their alarm. So sometimes bells or alarms will help them keep track of and bring them back on task, bring their focus back. The other thing is if you are setting up a schedule with times, and you'll have to find out what works best for your child, we also sometimes use timers. For my children, the count up timer is the doom of their life. They hate that because counting up never feels like it's going to end, even if it's counting up to 5 minutes. But the countdown timer, they love that because they see it's almost done. So it's the same amount of time, but it feels differently when you're seeing it go away than when you're seeing it add on. So it just depends on your child and what works best for them. But sometimes just putting a timer and say, you're just going to do math for this many minutes. When it's something they want to do, like you're giving them a break, you get to maybe have a snack or watch TV or play for 15, then you may want the count-up timer because it may feel like it's more time for them. So it's the same amount of time, but it's a trick you can use to help you. And the other thing is, some kids like to race the timer. Some of the kids that I work with, the kids with dyslexia that I work with, they hate reading lists of words, but you have to read if you're learning how to read. And so one day I just got my 1-minute timer, and you just push a button and it beeps after a minute, and I put it down like, let's see how many words you can read in 1 minute. And they got to hit the timer, and all of a sudden just adding that timer changed the task completely. All of a sudden they're reading words because they were competitive and because it was only for 1 minute. Sometimes racing the timer helps, making it a game. And sometimes giving out rewards. Sometimes giving out, like I'll give out little tokens, for getting things done. And sometimes we don't even have to agree on what they get the tokens for. They just know if I get tokens one day, I get something really great. And so they'll do things to earn tokens or prizes or time on the TV or whatever it is you choose to use, but use rewards for your benefit. And if your child is really struggling, you need to give the rewards out immediately because they need to associate, I earned something by doing this. As they get better organizing their time and getting the task completed, then you can require more to be done before you give it. But initially, reward every attempt that they're making to get things done and to get organized and make a really big deal about it, reinforce that. Again, if you have them choose their start and times, you just have to remind them. You might have to walk them through it and get them started. You may have to get the papers out or help them get the book and then come back every few minutes to remind them. The other thing is that when you're at home, look around and say, you know, do we have a place to do homework and the other activities that they need to do? Is the space organized? Is their space messy or is it neglected? There's a difference between those two things. Neglected is what we don't want to happen, where everything's falling apart. But if it's just messy, then maybe they can have a space that's messy, but help them organize the spaces that matter, like where they're doing homework. The other thing that I want to spend a couple minutes talking about is teaching kids skills they need to become independent adults. This was taught to me in a couple ways. There was a woman that lived by me, and she was in her 80s, and she would have the little girls come over, and she would teach them how to cook things and sew pillowcases and do things like that. And one day she said, you know, you moms are afraid to teach your kids how to do things because you're afraid they're going to burn themselves, hurt themselves, cut themselves, break it, do it wrong. She said, you really are doing them a disservice. You need to be teaching them those things. The second thing that happened is when my daughter went to college, I started getting really weird phone calls, like, how do you do this? And I think, I can't believe she's asking me how to do these. She's seen me do those things. I'm like, did I really not teach her how to do those things? And my assumption was, again, because I know how to do it and she sees me do it, she knows how to do it. Well, she didn't. And so I decided I better be a better mom to my younger kids and teach that older daughter how to do those things. And I read a book, and it was called The Parenting Breakthrough. And in this, the couple that wrote this book sat down when they were expecting their first baby and wrote down everything they needed to know in order to become an independent adult and decided at what age they needed to teach those things to their child. And I read through that, and it was kind of eye-opening because I would never think of having a 15-year-old call make their own dental appointments, or a 12-year-old call and order pizza, or when you're 14 to start learning how to fill up the car and learning how to check your oil and things like that. Or, you know, how many of you ever thought, well, I better teach my kid how to change the belt on the vacuum cleaner when it breaks, or how to take out the trap in the sink when you drop something down the drain. So all these kind of seemingly mundane tasks that somehow we learn or develop those skills, we need to realize that if our children are struggling with organizational skills, they're probably also struggling with learning those basic life skills that we take for granted. You know, go home and make a list. When a penny drops in the garbage disposal and it jams, have the whole family come in and say, well, let me show you where to put the wrench under the garbage disposal and dislodge that penny, and that there's a reset button. And I tease my husband because a couple of years ago that happened, and he never even knew that there was a wrench or a reset button on the garbage disposal. In all fairness, he grew up in a farm and they didn't have one. Those things make them teaching moments. When you have to do it, stop, grab your children and teach them how to do it, and your husband if he needs it, or your wife. But spend some time teaching those skills. And they put a big, huge list in their book, and I actually took part of that list and added to it. And I took my, she's 20 now, I took her and we started on things that you should know when you're 3, and we moved our way up. She thought it was really silly, but we caught some things along the way that she didn't know how to do. So that's kind of my soapbox, is that those are neglected skills, but please teach them as you're working on helping your kids become organized. If your child's an auditory learner, have them discuss and teach someone else. Talk to them about how they're going to arrange their schedule, and you write it down for them. You may have to use something like a tape recorder or an iPod or something to, and you know, we at my house we laugh, there's that commercial where, you know, the guy goes eggs, milk, bread into the little mic thing, and then they go to the store and it goes eggs, milk, bread. But if your child's an auditory learner, that might be really helpful. They can record what's going on in their classroom. You can ask the teacher, can you say into their mic what is due tomorrow, so they can record it and they can listen to it later, because writing it on the board isn't helping them. They need to hear it. So if they're auditory learners, focus on using that strength and helping them develop that. If they're kinesthetic, help them work together to assemble or put it together. Help them physically organize their space. They can put together like a little, even like a little traveling homework desk. You can get like a little crate and put some hanging files in it. Say, okay, here's the paper, here's pencils, this is where you're going to put your books, we're going to carry it to the kitchen table. When you're done, we're going to put it back. Here are the folders, you know, what color folder you want to use to take your homework back to school. So help them organize that. Go to school, help them organize their locker. One of the references that I got a lot of information is the organized student. And she goes through a whole bunch of different organizational systems of using colors, like the red folder and the red binder, that's for this class, and the blue one and the blue one, so they know that each class is color coordinated. You may have to go at the beginning of school and say, let's walk to every single class. What books do you need to take so you don't have to come back to your locker every single time? What do you need to bring home every day? And so have them physically walk through it, open the locker, pick up their materials, walk to that class, walk back, hit what they next. Now we're going to go to the next 2 classes before. So let them practice walking through it. If they're kinesthetic learners, that's going to help them remember than just telling them or writing it down on a piece of paper. If they're visual learners, one thing, and I wish I could remember where it came from. It could be from that organized student, but one of the things I've read, and this makes so much sense, after I read it, I'm like, oh, this works. This is my family, exactly. I would say, go clean the bathroom. And a few minutes later, my daughter come back, it's done. And I would go down and look at him like, you didn't do this. And she'd go, I know, don't tell me. And I'm like, okay, she knows what she's supposed to do, but she's not doing it. It looks done to her. And the suggestion was that a lot of times kids with learning disabilities, ADHD, Asperger's, they don't know what it's supposed to look like when it's done. They don't have the same visual image that we have of what it's supposed to look like. So I decided that there was one day for a couple of hours, and I stressed that, one day for a couple of hours, my house was completely clean. For about 2 hours, nobody was at home but me. That's the only reason it could get that way. And I went through and I took a photograph of every room, what it should look like when it's clean. Then I went and I typed up, these are the things, if you've done them, this room is done. And I went to the copy center and I had them laminate the cards with the list on the back and the picture on the front. So then it was, okay, grab the picture card for the room that you're supposed to clean. When you've done the things on the back, and they could use a dry erase marker and wipe it off because it was laminated, when you've done all those things and it looks like this picture, it's done. Well, I thought they were going to rebel against it because it seemed kind of elementary, but my 18-year-old told me a few months ago, I really love those cards. Could you make some more? Because we've changed our house around a little bit, so the cards don't exactly work. But there were a couple of reasons why she liked it. Her hyperactivity, her attention thing, she's actually almost hyper-focused. She just wants to rush through everything really fast to get to the things she wants to do. And so for her, I know what it's going to look like when it's done, and I know what I have to do. And if I do these things, I can leave. I'm done. The other thing, it's very neutral. It creates a lot more harmony in the home because it's not mom going and saying, well, you didn't do this. It's the card's telling her, and the card doesn't care. The card has no personality. So we don't have those power struggles because of it. You could use this with homework. After school, you could take a picture of everything that they need to do and the order they're going to do it. So if they're visual learners, this works really well. If you have a chart for them, they can put a sticker on the chart. When I get it done, they get their stickers on, they get a reward. So this is one idea for kids that are visual learners, and my kids happen to be visual learners picture-wise, but not very visual learners reading-wise, because the other thing we deal with in my family is we have a lot of dyslexic kids with dyslexia. So the picture helps them a lot. So that might be something that you might be able to adapt or try that might work for you. At school, what are the expectations of the teacher and what do they require? And so find out from the teachers and enlist the teachers in helping you and seeing what you can use in school that you're using at home that's successful. And a good teacher will say, what have you found that works? And if it does work, they'll say, well, great, I'd love to try that at school. If it works at school, most teachers will want to get suggestions if you find something that's helped out. So again, color coding notebooks, folders, planners, trackers, lists, great for visual. The timers, the iPods, self-talking, verbal reminders. You know, if the kids auditory, have them repeat back what the teacher asked them to do. So, or repeat back what you asked them to do. So now they're hearing it and they're saying it and they've heard you say it. Kinesthetic, things like accordion files. And we found out that worked for one of our kids. She had the backpack that had everything wadded up in it and everything that wasn't supposed to be at school was in it. And so finally, I went from one extreme to the other, I have to tell you, because then I went to, you can take a manila folder to school and that's everything. Everything goes in this one manila folder and your pencil, and you can have nothing else. And finally, we found a middle of the road. And my kids, I have to tell you, they like saying that I tell people not to do all the things that I did to them, which is true. And I said, but I'm learning from you guys. I'm becoming a better mother. So the accordion file seemed to work really well for her because it was plastic. It was really heavy duty. And it only had 5 slots. And for most kids, they only have 5 classes they really have homework in. And she was in junior high by the time we finally arrived at this accordion file solution. And so each of those tabs was for a class. And she put paper in the very front one, and she threw her pencil in it, and that's all she took. She brought back and forth to school was the accordion file with 5 or 6 pockets in it. And it worked really well, and it lasted. She didn't have a lot of clutter in her locker. She just had her textbooks. And I think she had a couple of spiral notebooks because there were a couple of teachers that said they wanted everything on the spiral notebook. So we did do that. So for some kinesthetic kids, they like making a map of their locker and where things are supposed to go and where they'll find it. So it goes right back, and they can put that on their locker. Again, walk through their day, practice using trackers, sometimes using computers for all these groups of kids because computers can be a lot more fun than working with people sometimes. Always have extra stuff because they're going to lose it. Use the internet and email as much as you can with teachers. And that can be your best friend, you know, to have a teacher that will communicate back and forth every day. What didn't get turned in, what's missing, or what we turned in. I had one teacher say, you know what, I post all my math assignments on the internet, so you can go every day and see what we assigned in class. So that when your kid comes home and says, I don't know what my homework is in math, you just go on the internet and you can find it. For some kids, it's having a textbook at home and one at school because it's the bringing back and forth isn't working either. So use that to communicate with the teachers. If you want, if the teachers will do that, have them email the assignment to you. So then you can print off as many copies as you need if one gets lost. The other thing is that anything you plan to do is going to take time to work. So you need to give it a little bit of time and then tweak it as it goes along. Nothing's going to happen immediately, and nothing's going to happen smoothly. It might work really well for a couple of weeks, and then it may not because the kids get sick of doing it. And then you may have to find out what happened that impacted this process that was working so well. Because it may not have anything to do with the organization system. It might have to do with other things that are going on in life. And then, again, you need to engage your child in doing this, or it really isn't going to work. And again, that's what we want to do anyway. We want to teach them so that they can be responsible adults, independent adults. So we want to engage them. if we engage them like we know they can do it, then that also reinforces, I think you're a capable person. I know you're a smart person. You have just problems with organization. You have to be honest. My oldest daughter had seizures for many years, and it damaged that part of her brain that organizes and works with her working memory. And so she would not hear the teachers would give instructions at the end of the class period when she's cleaning up and thinking about the next class. Well, she's cleaning up and thinking about the next class with the teacher's saying, well, there's a test in 3 days. And then she'd go to school and there'd be a surprise test for her. So for a while, and to a certain extent, I had to become her brain, her organizational brain. And the thing that we did is first we organized her very heavily, but then we kind of started backing off. And she would call and say, I have this problem. I don't know what to do. And then it was, well, if it was me, I would do this. What do you think you should do? And then it became, I have this problem, I don't know what to do. And it was like, well, what do you think you should do? So we went from, I'm really organizing you, now I'm telling you what I would do to help you think out loud. And now I'm going to ask you, force you to think out loud for yourself. And then hopefully the next step is I don't need to call mom, which is not exactly realistic because I'm almost 50 and I call my mom still and ask for help. So, but you need to kind of also be able to say, you have a problem with this. And we did. And you know what, once we could do that, and once we knew what was really wrong, again, it wasn't that she was doing it on purpose. She wasn't ignoring class and trying to not turn in her work. She really just, that part of her brain wasn't working very well. So we could sit down and say, you know, it's that working memory problem you have. So it's not personally more, you're really smart and you're capable, but it's that stupid working memory problem. And so because of that, we have to do things differently. What are some things that are working for you? What do you need me to help you with? So now it becomes very neutral. It's something we need to solve. But it's also realistic in that you also need to learn to advocate for yourself. So when you go into a new teacher, you need to say, the part of my brain that helps me organize and multitask has been damaged, and so I need you to write the things on the board, or I need you, so you need to tell the teacher what works best for you, or you need to go tell your boss what works best for you. So again, we're taking the kids into understanding how they learn, to being able to explain it to somebody else, and to be able to develop things that work for them. And then it no longer becomes a personal issue either. It's just that thing that we have to work with. And then follow through. The other thing, as a parent, I think, and even teachers that we're all guilty of, is we get things going and then we just kind of go on to something else. And you're going to have to continue to follow through. It's not going to just work on its own, at least not for a while. Keep things short. Reduce the number of steps that are involved in anything that they need to do. Give very specific answers rather than trying to get them to figure it out on their own. Very explicit in telling them, don't assume that because they see other people do it, that they will learn how to do it. At one of the schools I worked with, we were working with, I don't think I need to schedule in brushing my teeth, and their goals for themselves and we do tomorrow. What do you have to do later this? We're not trying to get out the door, but a very calm time to just sit and reflect here for a week. Did you talk to your teachers? No. Did you talk to your teachers? No. So I wrote on her hand so she would see it, and she would be able to ask her teachers what she's missing. And it worked for her, and she wasn't offended by it, or I wouldn't have done it. But it was, she just laughed, and I said, can I do this? Will that help? And she said, yeah. She says, just don't ask your teachers. She says, that will look stupid. So vacation was okay. So I tried to make that as visible as possible so that when she saw it today, it would help her remember to ask the teacher. This has a little bit more probably to do with school, but you want to make sure that you know, that kids aren't grouped together in a way that reinforces their weaknesses instead of their strengths. Sometimes, you know, the kid may not be organized, but they're really friendly, and so they put them by the kid that is really struggling in class, and then they're a really friendly, nice kid, but nobody gets anything done. So you want to make sure that at school things are arranged to help them be more successful. Be very explicit. We talked about that, and making it shorter. Open-ended tasks are really, really, really hard, where the teacher says, well, just pick a subject, any subject, and just write on it. And then 5 days later, they're still trying to figure out what subject they're writing on in the paper still. Open-ended things are really, really hard. So you may just have to say to the teacher, you need to be more explicit. But give the kid choice. So maybe say, I'm going to give you 3 choices to write on. Pick one of these 3 things, or 2, depending on the kid. But try not to make things really open-ended, because it will be open forever. And that can be really, really overwhelming. It can be really overwhelming. And especially because most tasks kids are given are not open-ended. And then when they're all of a sudden given one that is, they don't know what to do. They don't know where the boundaries are. And so unless they've practiced with that, it's not just the fact that they have to organize it, but it's like a completely new skill and mindset. So again, that goes back to we're trying to juggle lots of different things at the same time. Routines can be our friends. And again, that's going back to making that schedule, that maybe that go before we go to bed at night, let's sit down and talk about the day and make it a really positive routine. Also helps calm kids down before they have to go to bed. You know, just kind of bring us back to what we need to get done. But routines can be really helpful if I have the same thing going every time, especially for kids with Asperger's, and even kids to a certain extent with learning disabilities. You change a routine and everything goes out the door for the whole entire day. And even as a mom, I will tell you, if something changes in my routine during the day, it messes my whole day up. I'll forget to pick up a kid because something was 5 minutes later. So we all have problems with routine changes, but it's especially troublesome for them. Scaffolding, giving them assistance. So rehearse what they're going to do, practice it, reinforce it when they do right. And reinforcements can depend on your child and what works best for them. Could be tokens, could be stickers, could be TV time, computer time, play time, could be picking out what we're having for dinner tonight. So it really just depends on your child. But practice going through things. Practicing things is okay, and sometimes it creates safety. Let's practice how we're going to, how we're going to go through this process that you have to do every day after school. What are we going to do? Let's walk through it. Cueing systems. How are the adults going to help you in your life? Do you want me to walk by and tap you on the shoulder if I'm a teacher? Do you want me to set an alarm? Do you want me to come in and talk to you? It's really going to depend on your child, and I would find a cueing system. You need to set it up in school too. A lot of kids need, they don't want to feel different, so sometimes cueing systems at school are just as simple as tapping someone on the shoulder or touching their desk. And the other thing is, if a child becomes overwhelmed with things, it's good to have a cueing system for them to let the teacher know, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. And that could be something as simple as saying, I need to get a drink of water, or it could be something as simple as putting their pencil down in a certain place in their desk. Whatever is prearranged, work one-on-one with the teachers and say, this is how I feel when I start to get overwhelmed. Because a lot of times kids will get really overwhelmed, and once a kid gets to a certain point of overwhelmed feelings, they shut down, or they act out, or they start crying, or they leave the room, or they call home and ask mom to come pick them up because they're not feeling well. There's a whole set of things. The other thing I would suggest is helping your child identify how they start to physically feel when they're starting to feel anxious and overwhelmed. And then set up a system where you say, you know what, everyone feels a little bit of stress once in a while, but when you get to feeling this way, like when you get to the point where your neck starts hurting, that's your sign that you're starting to feel really stressed out. So that's when you start asking for a little break, to go get a drink of water and come back, something that's not abusing the privilege. You don't wait until you feel like you're going to throw up, because now it's too late and you're calling home and you just lost school. That's a good skill for them to develop as they get older too, start to recognize what I need to do to start calming myself down when I start feeling anxiety. So they actually you have to sit down and help identify that. And I've seen lots of different systems, one where they used a thermometer and they put like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 was how I feel, everyone feels, 2, I'm starting to feel anxious, 3, I need help now, 4 is gone, I'm gone. And help them identify and what they can do, and work with the teachers and work at home to help them get to that point so that they can intervene before it gets really bad. Sometimes it's done by faces, the face gets angrier or scareder or sicker. It just depends on your child and what you think will work best for them. And then practice it and let them see how it works. Make plans from shifting from one task to another ahead of time. Nobody likes going from something they want to do to something they don't want to do, okay? So, but if you have problems with transitions, then it's going to throw off your whole day. Most of us, we don't like doing it, but we do it. We have those skills, we move on to the next task. So make a plan for how you're going to do it. One thing I do with my students, and I do it with my kids, and I don't know if this is a scientific term or anything, but we call it front loading. I'm going to tell you ahead of time, in front of the activity, what's going to happen. So tomorrow, we're going to change our schedule. This is going to happen instead tomorrow. So I want you to be prepared and not be surprised when it happened. It still doesn't mean the transition is going to go super smooth, but it's going to go better than if I just spring it on in 5 minutes before it happens. Front loading maybe say you can go and watch TV, you can watch one show, but when that show's over, the TV's going to be off, and then you're going to do your homework. So I've set that priority, so then when I come back, and the other thing I do is I give kind of a countdown warning for those things too. 15 more minutes, and that this is what's going to happen. So, and in all fairness, because if I was in the middle of a show I really, really liked, and my mom came and told me that I had to turn it off and go wash the dishes, I'd be a little irritated. So I think if it irritates me, it's going to really irritate my son. So front loading is, especially if there's going to be a change in plan, try to give as much notice as you can and talk through what that change is going to be and what it's going to entail so that the child's prepared. And then ask the child, say, let's think of ways that we can get ourselves from this to this task. So maybe for my son, it's like, what are some ways we can go from finishing your TV show to getting your homework done? What is that bridge we need to help you move from one activity to the other where we'll be stressed out? And maybe you say, well, I'd like to go upstairs and get a snack. Want to sit down and have a snack for 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'll be able to start my homework. Okay, that's fair. That's a good bridge that takes us from one place to another. Or it could be just the opposite, as I phrased up here. How do we get, what are some things we can do so we get your homework done first, and then we can do to these other things? What do you need me to help you with so we can get this out of the way? The other thing is a lot of times things have nothing to do with school interfere with school. I may have had a bad day. Something may have happened with my friends. There may be something on TV I want to watch. There may be an activity that everyone's doing after school that I want to go do. My friends are all going to have a game or do this. And so all these things are interfering with my ability to get my homework done because that's all I want to think about. So sometimes if we have kids that don't want to get things done or be really oppositional, we maybe need to stop and sit and say, why is this so hard right now? And you may have to kind of get into a whole other conversation to find out what really is happening. So sometimes those transitions can be interfered with and getting things done because of other things that are happening. You get your things all organized and you give it to your kid and you send them out the door, and the next day the backpack's a mess again. Well, you have to cue them and help reinforce them and reward them when they use it. So you may have a really cool backpack and say, well, this is where the pencils are going to go, and this is where this is going to go, and the notebook's going to go here, and this is where you get to put your coat and your hat. And the more stuff they have to bring, the harder it is. Put plastic bins in the bedroom or in the mudroom or wherever it is they're coming in. Again, like the little portable container to put things in. The other thing is look for things that might interfere with the system, and it might be something really, really strange, like buying spiral notebook paper, but the kid never has paper to do their homework, and then you find out it's because the teacher says the papers have to be turned in separately, and she won't accept anything that's been ripped out of a notebook. So the kid's not saying, I can't do my homework on this paper, because you might have to, ask a few questions, say, what's wrong with this paper? Well, it's because I can't have a torn edge or the teacher won't take it. Or I read a story about the kid who didn't know how to get the pages in and out of his 3-ring notebook. And so, it could be something really strange, or just the vocabulary we use when we're explaining how to do things. The kid may not understand the word that we're using. A lot of times you can ask them to show you what they're doing and see if they're not doing it right, and that might help you understand why it's not working. or have them explain back to you how to do it, or you might, again, have to kind of press for details to find out what is interfering with the ability for everything to work. Organizing space. I would say that most unorganized kids in my house are keepers. They keep everything. They can't throw away anything, even things that have nothing to do with anything, even things that are really, really strange, and things that are garbage. We have to keep everything. It's really hard to be organized when you keep everything. And plus you start running out of places to put everything. And then you have the kids that are tossers. They throw everything away as soon as they come in the house, and that's why they never have anything that they need, because they just threw it away. So look at your child and decide, are they a tosser or a keeper? If they are a keeper, that in a way is going to be a little bit harder because everything's important. So you're going to have to help them understand, is this really important or is it really not important? And help them organize. Every child has to have a spot for their special junk. It could be rocks. It could be old soda pop bottles that they thought looked cool. It could be dolls. It could be Happy Meal toys. But there's something that is really special and important to them that may not seem special and important to us. So treat it as special and important and help them make a collection and organize it, display it. Help them go through their schoolwork and say, what are the most important things you do? And it might be easy to put everything in a box and at the end of the school year when it's not as important to them because it's past time, and then go through and say, let's pick out a few things that you want to keep and we'll store them somewhere else so that everything doesn't just get thrown on the floor and start piling up, because that will also create problems with their organization. And then create little zones for them. Our groom zone, and my daughter did this herself. I think she took it from the little cards. The first couple weeks of school, she had taped notes on the mirror of the bathroom. Turn on curling iron. Turn off curling iron. Put clothes here. She actually made herself a list of how to get ready because she knew that she would forget something if she didn't make the list. So sometimes that is a real important thing to do. Meltdowns. So this goes back to helping them identify their emotional states. And you do it when they're not emotional. Because when you're emotional, you're not rational anymore. And any time of trying to help someone at that stage just makes it worse. But, okay, so what is the problem that causes you this anxiety or to explode or to yell or to cry or to go lock yourself in your room? And so you help them define it. And then sometimes you might have to tell the child that there's a problem. They don't realize that they're doing anything that's creating a problem, so you might have to tell them. And then what happens when you start feeling this way? Does your heart start beating fast? Does your neck get sore? Do you start feeling sick to your stomach? Do you get a headache? So you help them identify that. Hopefully it's not, I want to hit someone, but sometimes that's what happens. And then you want to have a plan. When I start to worry, or when I start to get angry, or when I start to get sick, this is what I'm going to do. And then, am I following that, and how did I do with it? So when your life is really unorganized, it can be really confusing, and it can be really frustrating, and especially when everyone's telling you it's your fault all the time. You're at school. Teacher's like, well, everyone else got it in and you didn't, or I wrote it down and you didn't get it. You get home, your parents are like, why didn't you tell me about this? Or I can't go get this library book tonight, the library's closed, and so there can be a lot of stress. And so, again, go back and help them understand we're not organized people here. It's not because you're a bad person. We have to always remember we're not bad people, we're unorganized people. There's a difference. And so hopefully that helps with some of those meltdowns. The other thing is you might have to look at how kids go through their tasks during the day and find out why it's so inefficient. And I was going to talk about this earlier and I forgot, so I'm going to bring it up now, so I apologize for being a little ski-wumpus in the presentation. The example I gave of, you're taking a 45-minute shower and you think it's fast, and you think it's like a 5-minute shower, but it's not. Well, what we did is we said, let's go through and you tell me your routine. What you might find out is your kids are doing things that are really inefficient. For example, and I'll use this as an example, well, I wash my hair and then I put the conditioner on, and the conditioner says it's supposed to stay on for 3 minutes. So then I stand in the shower and I wait for 3 minutes. And after 3 minutes is up, then I can start, washing my body, and it's like we can't do two things at once. And then it's like we get out of the shower, and Mom, you told me that I needed to let my hair towel dry a few minutes before I blow dry it because it's super long. So I'm going to stand there with the towel for 15 minutes, and after that I'll dry my hair, and then I'll put my makeup on. Instead of, well, can we put our makeup on while our hair is in a towel? You see, this system, it's like I know all the things I'm supposed to do, but my system is so inefficient that it's taking me forever to get it done. And in my mind, I'm thinking, common sense would say I would do some of these things in a different order. And again, that's me. I'm thinking in a different way. I'm organizing in a different way. So sometimes it's analyzing the systems that they're using and then helping them develop a more efficient system. So your kids may be more organized than you think they are. They're just doing things inefficiently. So that would be the other suggestion I would give you, is to look at how they're doing the things that they're doing and then say, that's really good that you're doing that. I think if we change it this way, this might help a little bit. The other thing that is really important too is that a lot of these kids do not think about thinking. They don't think through things. They might do the same thing inefficiently over and over and over again and not stop to analyze why it's not working. So a good thing for you to do, and I tell this to teachers too, is to think out loud and model thinking for your children. Gosh, if I had this problem, I would probably do this first, and then I would try this. Or I would go ask this person for help. This didn't work. Maybe next time I should do it differently, and it didn't work because of this. So you're going to start verbalizing what's going through your head so they hear what it sounds like, what people do in their head. You know, we all talk to ourselves in our minds and kind of think through things, but sometimes in these kids, they don't do that. Or if they do it, it's after the fact and it's too late. Or they think, that didn't work, but they don't have the skills in order to figure out why it didn't work. So that would be my other suggestion, is model thinking. Think out loud for your children, and then start getting them to think out loud so that when you see they have a problem, say, what do you think you could do to solve that problem, or where would you go get help? So you're going to help them learn to do that on their own. But they need to see somebody do it. They need to hear what it sounds like to be done. 2 websites. You already have the Parent Center website, because that's how you found out about here. The National Center for Learning Disabilities has a lot of really good information, and you can also sign up for newsletters and information that they will send to you. So it's a really good one. You can go in as a parent or as a teacher, and you can put in different disabilities, and it'll say, this is what it looks like in a classroom, this is what it looks like at home, this is things they'll have a hard time with. So it's a really great one. Our website, Linda already gave that to you. These are 3 books that I got some of the information out of, just so that you have them as a reference if you're interested in it. The Organized Student, it's just a book that just talks about how to organize kids at home, at school, and in different areas of their lives. Executive Skills in Children and Adolescents, it actually has checklists and stuff that you can use. The kids can go through and analyze their different styles, and you can give one to the teacher, and the teacher can write down what they see. And then it has little forms for plans. It has some of those little charts like the happy face, the smiley face, like how do I deal with different emotions and respond to that. And the Parenting Breakthrough is the one I mentioned that had all the lists of things that you're supposed to know how to do to become an independent adult, just for your information.
Thank you for participating in the Executive Functioning webinar. We hope you have found this information useful. This presentation was brought to you by the Utah Parent Center, Family Links Conferences, and the Learning Disabilities Association of Utah. If you need individual assistance, please contact the Utah Parent Center at 801-272-1051 or visit us on the web at www.utahparentcenter.org.